This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now. Brad Johnson, a former CIA operations officer and an intelligence expert, has been analyzing the Russia collusion story for America Daily. But Brad says the U.S. shouldn't focus only on the corrupt acts of federal officials. U.S. intelligence agencies should keep a close eye on China. In today's America Daily, reporter Arleen Richards talks to Brad Johnson about the biggest long-term strategic threats facing the United States. Good morning, Arleen.
Hi, Mark.
So who does Brad think are the biggest threats to the U.S.?
He says that China is the biggest threat, but military intelligence came up with this term, 4+1, to identify 5 major threats. The 4 represents China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran. The 1 represents terrorism. According to Brad, this breakdown is not entirely accurate because the other 3 countries are not nearly as threatening as China. He says it should really be 1 + 3 + 1.
And Brad is going to explain how he thinks this all adds up.
So you are also an op-ed writer for the Epoch Times, and you've written a number of articles about the area of intelligence. And one of your recent articles is titled The Math of Long-Term Strategic Threats to the U.S. So tell us, how does the government, the U.S. government, view long-term strategic threats?
Yeah, and well, in government, sometimes it's hard to tell. Since I've learned to speak governmentese, the language of government, I sometimes forget to translate back into real English. But the way government refers to long-term strategic threat is what has commonly become known as 4+1. By the way, the military are the best guys in the world for coming up with these new little sayings and names of stuff and acronyms. They're always good at it. So I'm pretty sure it was the military that came up with the 4+1. But the 4+1, and this is referring to long-term strategic threat to the United States, are the 4 being 4 countries of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, and the 1 being separated out as terrorism. So no disagreement on my part as to the fact that those are all long-term strategic threats to one degree or another. Now, one of the points I make in this article is that, unfortunately, I think it implies not something purposely deceptive, but I think it implies something that's important and not accurate. And that is the relative threat between these things. And China is far and away, head and shoulders above everybody else as a long-term strategic threat. You've got China, who just, for example, now China has just had more sanctions put on them by President Trump because they're still not playing on a level field with us and stealing proprietary information from companies that want to do business in China and all of those things. It's part of the price of doing business with them. So they're refusing to behave by legal standards in doing business and steal billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of information and techniques and equipment and so on. So what allows us to put sanctions on people, on other countries rather, is the US dollar. And all of this money eventually has to go through the automatic clearinghouses, which is controlled by the United States because this is dollars. So if they operate in a system outside of the dollar, right now the whole world operates on this system. Eventually everything has to go through the dollar and therefore through the United States. So we cut them off on these things because they have to do business with using dollars. If they have an outside system that is not reliant on the dollar, they are immune to many of these sanctions, perhaps not all, but most of them. So just a little tidbit for everyone. Who is the largest producer of Bitcoin in the world? China. Now, so why would they be doing that? Is because they're trying absolutely to create a secondary competitive monetary system that is immune to the effects of the dollar. So they're producing this in large quantities. To produce Bitcoin, you need electricity to run your computers and the computers to run the programs to create the Bitcoin. It's surprisingly require a lot of electricity to run a lot of these big computers. So that's a big deal. Now, China has set up a thing near one of their biggest electrical plants, and that's just all computers all the time producing all this Bitcoin. So they're not hoarding it. They're pushing it out into the world so that it becomes a competitive monetary method, system. So, like, for example, in the United States now, you're seeing ATMs in a few places, not many, but ATMs that work on Bitcoin. You go put in your card, you get cash, you've sold a quarter of a Bitcoin or whatever to get so much cash, whatever it's worth at the time. In Europe, this is far more common. You're seeing it all over Europe and Asia. They're using these things because China's helping push, get these banks out there, get all of that out there. So it becomes convenient for everyone to have Bitcoin, earn Bitcoin, convert money into Bitcoin to make that competitive system grow. So you also see things like China. They're building those islands out in the South China Sea. Well, they're putting runways on it and aircraft and military installations. They're doing all of that because that's the new Silk Road, if you will. These shipping lanes where everything goes now has to go past military bases. If they want to stop it, they stop it. There's nothing you can do once they get all the system up and running. They're going to control these pathways. Now, just take, for example, fish products that we eat in the United States. The vast majority of those, 90% of them, are imported, and of those that are imported, like 80%, 70 or 80% of those are from this area of Asia. So that would be something that could be cut off immediately. Now, that's only one item. There's a lot of other things that could be done that way. So they're controlling a lot of the economic issues that exist, food and trying to take over and create another monetary system. And at the same time, they're implementing draconian control systems over their own population in China. They have around 50 million cameras set up, controlled and operated by the government to watch their own people. And that's not just in the big cities. That's out in some of the small villages now. They're even controlling the population with these cameras in smaller rural villages. So, I mean, it's draconian what they're doing. So there is nobody else out there that can compare to China. They're just head and shoulders above anybody else for their military threat. And that's just mentioning a couple things off the top of my head. Now, the other people, North Korea, okay, yes, they're a problem, but they probably wouldn't even exist without China. They need China's help on everything. Iran all gets help from other people, including China, Russia as well. But again, they're a secondary type problem. Even Russia itself, Vladimir Putin is the richest man on the planet. And he's interested in building that new dacha on the Black Sea and enjoying his money. And you can see he goes and gets plastic surgery and is famous for having these girlfriends and playing on the hockey team. And that man is now a bon vivant. You know, he's out having a good time, living a good life. Now, he's also interested in taking over back some areas of the Soviet Union and so on, but he's not out trying to do what China's trying to do. He's just a different type of threat, lesser type of threat than what you see out of China, not so aggressive and not so expansionist. So I argue that it's a little bit of not a purposeful deception, but a deceptive result by saying 4+1. So I think it needs to be a 1-3-1. I mean, it's still the same 5 threats, but you've separated out terrorism because terrorism is a different type of threat from Russia or North Korea. It's not a state player. It's not a country. So it's separate. And I would argue that China is so much more of a threat than Russia, Iran, and North Korea that they also should be separated out. So my argument in this piece is that it's not a 4+1, it's a 1+3+1, which still equals 5. But that I think would be a far more accurate portrayal of what it is. So when it's discussed among government circles and national security experts and the White House and National Security Council, the 1-3-1 it keeps in mind for everyone just where these relative threats are and where we really need to keep our focus. Because if we've got all our focus on something with Russia collusion and it's not on China, this stuff is all going to bite us in the rear end. We've got to be on top of it, and all the national security people need to keep that at the forefront.
So now we understand how the numbers should stack up. But Brad thinks there is a new threat that is not getting enough attention.
There's another element to this that I would also like to mention, and that was part of what I included in this article, and that is that there's a new threat, and relatively speaking, and that new threat is Turkey. And just briefly kind of looking at what they've done, Erdogan is a funny thing. Erdogan actually started out as a soccer player. He was kind of famous as a soccer player in Turkey, which of course is the most popular sport. Out of that, he went into politics, and he was very extremist. And that was back under the former type of government that they had, which was not a Muslim government. It was just a non-religious form of government that was founded under Ataturk. So he brought in these extremist religious ideas into politics and was eventually put in jail for a short period, kicked out of politics supposedly for life and all of that. So he learned his lesson and kept a tighter rein on his mouth and wasn't so vocal, saying all these things that he wanted to do. But make no mistake, he's been this radical Islamist from the very beginning. And so as moving forward, he started to win elections based on a kind of a nationalist campaign and, would hearken back to the Ottoman Empire, which was the great days of Turkey, if you will. It was where they were at their most powerful. And then finally, this kind of culminated 3 years ago, like 3 years and a month ago, I think it was in July 3 years ago, that there was a coup attempt. Now, it was supposedly a military coup attempt. And there were two aspects of that I find deeply revealing. One is it was put down overnight. It was basically took place in the afternoon. By the next morning, it was all over. Now, an interesting thing, no one was arrested and no one was hurt. Now, in Turkey, that's not the way these guys do business. They're perfectly happy to shoot people and stuff. So it's so incredibly unlikely that Erdogan would have allowed attempts to take place against him to overthrow him and not respond with overwhelming force. But he responded, but it was put down. It was just sort of like everybody shook hands and went home. Okay, exercise over. So that being a genuine attempted coup, I think is just very unlikely. And of course, what he did, there was a kind of not really a political group, it's supposedly a kind of an education group, the Gulenists organization, that's educational in nature and these sorts of things. But he blamed the Gulenists because they were relatively popular among Turks. He blamed them for this attempted coup. But here's the second half of this where it really it makes no sense that this was some sort of real coup. And that is, in the few days following all of this, Erdogan consolidated his position as president completely. And he went through and everybody in the military, everybody in the teachers, the judges, every ministry, every department of the Turkish government, they threw out 160,000 people because they weren't Erdogan loyalists. And they brought in 160,000 Erdogan loyalists to replace them. So beginning in the days following this, you had to have two lists, one of 160,000 people that you didn't trust and another of 160,000 people you do trust to replace them. So putting together these lists of more than 300,000 people is not something you do on a weekend. It's not something you do in a week. It's not something you do in a month. I just don't see how this could have been anything other than being prepared for at least a year, because he would not have had all of that in place to take those actions so quickly on the heels of this so-called coup that he blamed on the Gulenists. Just that quickly, he just couldn't have done it. It just isn't physically possible. They're just not that place where everything is electronic and you push one button. I don't think you could do that here. I don't think the president of the United States could replace 160,000 people in such a short period of time and have the new ones to come in. So just looking at this, I think it's extraordinarily unlikely that this was anything other than a fake coup that Erdogan wanted in order to fully consolidate his position, which, make no mistake, now he's in charge. Every gun in that country belongs to him. His troops, his policemen, everyone is fully under his control. And now you've started to see some things actually kind of shift in these past 3 years. And a lot of the things he's saying, for example, now one of their stated goals is to establish a greater Middle East army that will then allow them to take their seat at the world table as a superpower. Now, Turkey by itself is not enough to be a superpower, so they're certainly looking back to the greater Ottoman Empire as their goal. And why else would you have a greater Middle East army? That's not something that Turkey needs to defend itself. They're not particularly under threat by anyone, and they're a member of NATO. So that just it's a non sequitur. It's something that doesn't go with their current situation. So they can only be an army of conquest. That's clearly what this is to be, is is an army to subjugate the region around them, to go back out to the Ottoman Empire borders. Along those lines, while Erdogan doesn't say specifically he wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire, his close associates around him do say that. And they talk about, for example, his surrogates in Syria, reestablishing dominance for Erdogan for the caliphate. And that, I think, fairly clearly is how Erdogan sees this playing out. Reestablish all of these zones, create surrogates to hold and control areas, to reinstate them within the caliphate and the Ottoman Empire. And one of the things he's done, I also find deeply revealing. He built a 1,000-room presidential palace, which is now the largest presidential palace on the planet. And whenever he has foreign visitors come, he lines them up in front of all these Turkish soldiers that are in traditional Ottoman Empire uniforms and previous Turkish Empire uniforms, the heyday of greatness. And so he's presenting a picture. I mean, Google that, and you'll find dozens and dozens of photographs of this in front of this 1,000-room presidential compound. It's really something what he built there. So I'm sure there's a little bit of ego to mix in with those 1,000 rooms in that new palace. Clearly, he has designs on these things. Now, how is he pushing these things in Europe? Why is this a danger to us, the United States and the West? He is now the world's largest benefactor, supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood has worldwide representation, including here in the United States, in New York and Washington, and very embedded in Europe. There's also the Grey Wolves, which he now essentially controls. The Grey Wolves are a long-time traditional Turkish organization, and you can kind of compare them to the brown shirts under the Nazis. They were the initial stormtroopers for the Nazi party to quash political opposition, to go riot and beat up and throw rocks through windows and that sort of thing, which is what you can see the Grey Wolves doing in Europe, putting pressure on the system there. He's also now backing a number of NGOs, these non-government governmental organizations that do supposedly charity work and all of these things. Now, the German and Austrian governments have repeatedly said that these organizations are involved with espionage. They are conducting espionage in Europe, which then, of course, will report back to the Turkish government. So he's got all of the system set up now. He's well on the way to taking control back of Europe. Well on the way. This isn't something that's just starting out. It's well under march, if you will. So it's quite advanced. So this is why I say, if you start looking at this, I think part of what needs to be done is his Turkey's membership status in NATO needs to be reexamined. Above my pay grade to say that they should necessarily be thrown out on their ear. But I think some steps need to be taken to look at that membership and suspension or limits on their membership or throw them out. I think all of those issues need to be up on the table to be looked at. They've already, the negotiations with the EU, they were long in negotiation with the EU to join the European Union as a country, as a member country. That has long ago, several years ago, completely fallen apart, and a lot of it based on the human rights abuses that you now see. You now have a dictatorial power with absolute authority and control in Turkey, and their goals are quite clear. It's reinstate the Ottoman Empire with Erdogan as the caliph. Now, you just don't see anybody fighting back. He's got enough control in Europe. They are not effectively fighting back. And he has these lobbying efforts in the United States where they spend millions of dollars. And I think they have a dozen or so lobbying firms here in the Washington, D.C. area that are very large companies, very effective, have a lot of people on the Hill. So you just don't see this being discussed. And that's one of the things why I really want to get this initiative out so that it's on the table for everybody to see and think about. Now, everything I've said is pretty simple, plain, straightforward fact. It doesn't take a lot of research to uncover. You just have to look. And so far, because of the very effective lobbying that's being done by Turkey here in the United States, very well funded, you're just not seeing it take place. So this is one of the reasons why I think this should then be changed to the 1+4+1, if you will, using the same governmentese sort of terminology. Still, China remaining the greater threat among all. But I don't see how you could argue that Turkey's not a greater threat overall to the West than North Korea. So why would it not be included on the list? I think anyone taking a dispassionate look at this would, generally speaking, agree. Now, you could argue over how great a threat or how little of a threat it is, but I don't think you can argue it's not a threat. So, like I said, that's really why I'm pushing this particular initiative, and I wrote the op-ed is because I wanted to see this put out there and let it be, discussed, agreed with, disagreed with.
So Brad thinks Turkey is a bigger threat than North Korea, and I think he made some very good points about why. But I wondered how much of a threat Russia was in the lineup, since Brad talked about Putin's ability to make deals, which I think involves blackmail. I asked him to talk more about Putin's strategy. Now, I wanted to go back to something you said about Putin. You also said in your article about how wealthy he is. And I believe you've mentioned this in other interviews in terms of him making deals. So how does his ability to make deals and become wealthy connect to Russia's place in the fore as a threat?
It has impact. To what degree, I think, there would be a lot of room to argue different ways on that. But in the Russian language, they have a term you kind of use more or less in business, but the term is provide a roof, like the roof of a house. Somebody has to provide the roof. So if you're going to go in business, somebody's going to provide the roof to you, which means who you pay off. All of these payoffs, the whole system, and all of Russia is that way. You don't go into business and make any money in Russia without paying somebody off. And that system works its way up. And also, freelancing in that system, to provide protection and so on, like a little mafia group in the corner in St. Petersburg, those guys, they get consumed by the bigger boss, which is always leads back to Putin. So if you're making money, you're paying money up. And if you're paying money up, it goes to Putin. And he has amassed tens of trillions of dollars with all of this. Russia, in the scheme of things, is a fairly large country with a lot of natural resources and a not as large as the United States, of course, but a relatively speaking large economy. So if you've got really one person that's sucking the system dry, that one individual is going to amass a lot of money. So he's got, famously, he's got a multi-million-dollar mansion in downtown Paris, one of the nice areas, and he has whatever he wants. Just built a huge palace I believe it was on the Black Sea. Just he's doing whatever he wants. He loves to be able to go get facelifts and those things and try to stay young, and he does whatever he wants. So I mean, the guy's living a lifestyle of the rich and famous. So a guy who's doing that now, yes, he's done a lot of things where he's like taken over a chunk of Ukraine. But what was the part of Ukraine he took over? Well, it was the industrial part. He says, there were ethnic Russians there, I had to protect them. Yeah, okay. It's an industrial area. That's where he makes money. Now, there might have been Russians there too, but he didn't care about that really. He wanted that industrial area under his control because it makes him more money. And all of those things that you see him doing all relate back to that. You rarely see him go off and run off and do stuff that's just, completely unrelated to him making money. Now, he still tries to keep the KGB guys, now they're SVR, FSB, but he tries to keep them busy and happy because that's where he came out of. So you see them do a lot of propaganda campaigns against the United States, and they're running intelligence operations worldwide. And most assuredly, he wants to be aware of what's going on in the United States. And if he can get plans and intentions from some spy penetrating something important here in the United States, he's happy to go do all of that stuff. But let me add one little thing. The instant this came out about trying to influence elections and all that, anyone who kind of knows the score here in Washington knew that was all BS. Because why would Putin run that type of intelligence operation to influence elections in the United States when he can already do it legally? It's called lobbying. He can already legally and already does legally try to affect the politics of the United States through lobbying. Just exactly what I was just describing what Turkey does. The country of Turkey keeps itself off the radar screen by lobbying and making sure it doesn't come to attention of Congress and the Senate, and they're not going after Turkey because of XYZ. Russia's doing exactly the same thing for exactly the same reasons. And they also have a wonderful big budget to work with, and they have plenty of lobbying firms here that are happy to take that money and go push these issues trying to impact politics. So why on earth would Russia want to go do all that stuff? They wouldn't. They don't need to. And it's not illegal to lobby. That's legal here by the laws. And even if we know Russia's doing it, that company, all they have to do is go register that they're representing a foreign country, Russia in this case, and off they go. It's completely legal. They can go to the state of whatever it is and put out radio campaign and this and all that legally. So it makes absolutely zero sense for Russian collusion. I mean, like I said, anyone who really looked at it up front and kind of knows the system looked at this whole thing and went, yeah, they're not doing it. It makes no sense. They wouldn't do it. Why would they?
Earlier, Brad said that 4+1 was misleading because it puts 4 countries on an equal playing ground. After he changed it to 1+3+1, did he analyze who had the greater strength among the other 3 countries?
Yeah, he said it's hard to separate, and you have to take into consideration a country's capacity to do harm, such as nuclear weapons. Here's what he said about how the game is played.
I mean, I think certainly with Islamic extremists, I would say making the United States a Muslim country under Sharia law is a long-term goal. So I think you could probably, Turkey and terrorism, those sort of are kind of one thing in that particular context. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a long-term goal. Short-term goal in that sense, I think would be, from Turkey's perspective, certainly reestablish the Ottoman Empire, which was basically Europe and the area around them. So that, I think, is their primary goal for now. I don't think they've forgotten the rest of the world. It's just, do that first and then start trying to expand outward. The threat after China, it gets hard to separate. Like I said, psychologically, I don't think Putin is really interested in world conquest. I just don't see that as really one of his goals. So I think it's convenient for him to have the United States always be the bugaboo threat out there on the horizon that he can use to operate against them for domestic consumption. So, I don't think he really wants to take on the United States in any particular way, but it's very beneficial to him to have this strong Russian military. It creates nationalist pride. He can use that to his benefit politically, locally, domestically, all of those things. You don't see him do anything really outside of that box. If it doesn't make him money and if it doesn't kind of keep him in power in Russia, then, he's not really doing that sort of stuff that much. So I think that's his perspective. Now, it doesn't mean he's not a threat. They have nuclear weapons. They are a threat. You have to always take into consideration what is their capacity to do harm. And part of the reason you have to take that into account is because, circumstances change. What if Putin got assassinated tomorrow? And I'm not suggesting that happen or anything, no inside information, just this is what if. If he were to get assassinated, who comes to power behind him? Because all that capacity remains in place no matter who's in charge. So part of the gaming that you have to do is look at what their capacity to do harm is. And so then in that sense, right now, do they want to do that? No. Do they have the capacity to do it? Yes. So are they something that needs to be high on the chart? Yes, because of their capacity, not their intentions. So it just happens to be the case with him. Now you take Iran. Iran's a far lesser threat than Russia. They have far fewer resources. Apparently they don't have nuclear weapons right now. They're having some trouble with the delivery system. Their intercontinental missiles are not perfect. So they don't constitute the real threat that like a Russia does or China does. But nevertheless, these guys would be very happy to drop half a dozen nuclear weapons on Israel. They'd be happy to do it. And just that would be pandemonium. And if they could hit part of the United States and those things, I think they would be willing to do it. And they talk like that. They mean it. They, generally speaking, you can take what the Iranians say, and they're kind of actually fairly straightforward people. I mean, they lie too, but oftentimes when they're talking about their intentions for the world and what they want to do and the new world order and stuff, they just lay it out. They're saying what they intend to do. So they've said they would be happy to do those things and want nuclear weapons to be able to destroy Israel. They want to kill all Jews, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So as far as like willingness to use these things, I think Iran is the greater threat. If you were to compare Russia, they're kind of opposites. Low capability, but high intent, where Russia's low intent, but high capability. So where do they go on the chart? That's why I kind of lump them in the middle, is because, who knows how that'll play out. The future is very difficult to read. So it's tough to predict those things. And North Korea is kind of like that. I mean, yeah, they're doing the same things, and those programs between Iran and North Korea are actually fairly closely tied. They share rocket information for intercontinental missiles and medium-range missiles, and they're virtually identical because they're using the same technology. I think they share, I don't know for sure, but I think they share nuclear information as well. on how to produce weaponry, nuclear weaponry. So again, I don't know that they have a high either intent or capacity to create a great deal of harm. But you got one guy who makes all the decisions, and he would probably do anything if he thought he was going to be kicked out of power. And I think he'd drop a nuke anywhere to try and stay in power. So they all sort of vary based on the different conditions. So it's hard to have such an easily stratified threat level to these people. But that is why I say that China clearly floats to the top right away, because they're doing so much and have so much intent to, I don't think necessarily like conquer the United States, but become the new world power and reduce the United States to second class.
I had a thought that China is the biggest threat. So should the United States citizens be worried about communism coming into our country? Here's Brad's answer.
I think that is an extraordinarily interesting question. And, philosophically, as we talked about earlier, the leadership of the various agencies in the United States view socialist countries with a friendly eye. And for example, when was the last time you heard the State Department come out hard against Cuba? They just don't. And we've seen Democrats, cabinet level positions go, oh, well, when I think to myself, what do I need to do? I think, what would Chairman Mao do? And he's one of the people I look up to and respect and all of that. So there's a lot of, among the left here, the Socialist Democratic Party that we're kind of faced with now, there's a lot of respect for socialism, communism, and these regimes. You can kind of call it whatever term you want, but they're really kind of all the same. Okay, it's the communist Chinese and the socialist Cubans. I mean, what's the difference between their governments and how they run things? And of course, one's much smaller, but there's really very few differences. They're more or less a different flavor of the same sort of thing. So I don't make huge distinctions between them. So we're kind of faced with that problem, because if you look at it, what philosophy in life has done more cruelty to mankind than socialism? Chairman Mao has probably murdered more people on this planet than anybody else. You saw the Nazis. Everybody tried to pretend that they're something other than socialist, that they were the nationalist, socialist German Workers' Party. German Workers' Party, I mean, that's not a socialist name. They have socialist in the name of Nazi. So, I mean, they were that. You saw, the Russians early on, following World War II, they slaughtered people by the hundreds of thousands as well. So, I mean, Pol Pot out of Cambodia slaughtered people by the thousands. Every time you go back and look at it in, say, reasonably modern history, the people that are slaughtering everybody are always on the left. If you look at most of the violence in the streets today, it's almost all from the left. So for me, this philosophy is just evil. Why would we look up to Chairman Mao? Because his kill ratio was higher? I mean, why admire that guy? What did he ever do that was, a product of genius or any great thing for anyone other than just kill people? And, he consolidated power. All those guys do all of that. Stalin, Pol Pot, Chairman Mao, Fidel Castro, they kill people to maintain and take control. And they're happy to kill anybody to maintain that control. And they try to convince people that they should give up their life for the revolution so that they maintain control. That's just that philosophy. They're all the same. So it is a tremendous evil. And it's something that's picked up by people here in the United States, that anyone that really honestly looked at it, I mean, if this news were to put out on what these guys really do and what they really believe in, and it was made public, I think you'd see the socialist movement within the Democratic Party just be destroyed and thrown out. And they might take the Democratic Party with them, but I think you'd see them all thrown out. And unfortunately, I mean, you see some of that in the Republicans too. I mean, there's a lot of Republicans that are quite liberal. The old-fashioned Democrats and the liberal Republicans are quite similar. And then you have the radical leftists now within the Democratic Party. And then you have kind of the conservative Christian Tea Party sorts of guys are kind of the fourth faction, if you will. Each party kind of divided into two. So, yeah, I think unfortunately the people that are the good people in life are kind of, unfortunately, kind of a minority. And now we don't see honest debate. And this whole PC politically correct stuff is to stop debate. And all of this stuff about how you have the 72 sexes and how there was a thing in the news today of a socialist group talking, and one of the people said, "Hey, you guys, please keep the noise down while we're giving presentations." And they went crazy on him for saying, "You guys, that's sexist," and all this sort of stuff. It's all of this stuff is to stop people from talking and debating and questioning. So I think the leftist philosophy is evil.
That's Brad Johnson, telling it like he sees it and providing us with up-to-date analysis on intelligence issues of concern to the United States. Arleen, thanks for another interesting interview with Brad Johnson.
You're welcome.
This has been America Daily. Please join us next Thursday when Brad Johnson talks to Arleen about the overabundance of intelligence agencies in the U.S. Do we really need 17 agencies? I'm Mark Jackson. Thank you for listening. This is America Daily, bringing you the best in truthful news updates and in-depth reports happening now.